Now, for more on this, we have with us Arshad Yusufzai, a political analyst from Peshawar. Now, Mr. Yusufzai, thank you very much for your time. Now, Mr. Yusufzai, tell us now, with the Taliban now in control of all major cities other than Kabul, do you believe President Ashraf Ghani might resign?
Well, it is still a question that needs thorough investigation, because President Ghani has never said that he's going to never going to resign, and even if he is going to resign, he would not do it to the Taliban, as the interior minister and other people are talking, that a solution or a peaceful solution is only possible that interim government would be formed. Someone from the government that is acceptable to the Taliban would sit in and take care of Kabul until a peaceful transition. So I don't think that President Ghani to resign as officially as he should do.
Right, Mr. Yusufzai, also US President Joe Biden has sent an additional 5,000 troops for the safe exit of the US personnel, obviously. If there would be an attack on Kabul, could we see the US dragged back into the conflict on the ground?
No, this is not going to happen because the Taliban have clearly said in a statement recently that they are not going to harm anyone inside Kabul, and anyone means the diplomatic missions as well. The statement says that everybody should stay where they are. They should not try to leave Kabul, because the Taliban are not going to fight. They do not want to suffer, to cause any casualties, and they do not want to destroy the city. So I believe they are not going to harm anyone, including the diplomatics. And we have seen that the Russians do trust this statement, so they are not leaving.
Right. This does connect to the statement you just said. Well, Russia is not evacuating its members, its diplomats from Afghanistan. How can we say there is a trust between Russia and the Taliban, but there is a trust deficit between the United States and Taliban?
Well, the Taliban, they were in talks with the Russians and Chinese and Iran for the past year and a half, and the trust was built there. The Russians invited them a number of times to Moscow, where they had meetings and the peace process talks. So the Taliban believe the Chinese the most, and then afterwards they trust the Russians and the Iranians. With the U.S., the Taliban are still, there is a peace agreement that is intact, but the Taliban have complained time and again that the Americans have violated the peace agreement, and they do not trust them in that sense.
Right, Mr. Yusufzai, also, if the war in Afghanistan protracts further, would there be any additional influx of refugees into Pakistan? And what could be the monetary and social cost of such an exodus?
Well, Pakistan is expecting between 500,000 to 700,000 refugees coming into Pakistan. The UNHCR puts this number to 200,000 or less than that. But any number of refugees, additional refugees coming to Pakistan, is an issue for Pakistan, because Pakistan is not in a financial or economical position to support these refugees. Plus, there is always this worry about the attempts of unwanted or anti-Pakistan elements trying to enter Pakistan through this system. However, Pakistan would only agree to having more refugees only if the international community, international aid agencies seriously and sincerely commit to helping them out, because Pakistan cannot do that on its own.
Well, definitely, and I'm sure that we hope that there isn't a refugee situation, and obviously the influx does not come onto Pakistan. We have with us also Maria Sultan, defense analyst. Now, Maria, thank you for your time. Now, Maria, tell us, if the war in Afghanistan protracts further, would there be an additional influx of refugees into Pakistan?
Well, I think there is no two opinions about it. It will depend on two factors. One, how smooth is the transition to the interim setup, and after that, what kind of international traction we will see with regards to the Afghan government, which would be led by the Taliban, because that is something which is imminent and that is likely to flow. The second issue is whether or not the militias, which would be led by different warring factions, which would may be supported by the current outgoing Afghan government, whether they continue, and if that is the case, in that case we would be looking at a lot of refugee influx. So for Pakistan, it is a serious concern, because we understand that at this very moment, every day we are receiving almost 100,000 people from Spinball that and different border crossings between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and only 99.9% of the people have got no legal documentation with them. Only 200 people actually solicit a visa from the Pakistani embassy in Kabul, and that's how they transfer to Pakistan. So for us, the issue will be one, border management. Number two,
Right, Mari, you were talking about how border management and how difficult the situation is going to be for Pakistan to obviously take care of such a large number of influx from refugees coming from Afghanistan. But just for clarity, what is Pakistan's policy on this? If the situation worsens, is Pakistan ready to accept refugees?
Well, I think first of all, we need to be very clear on this issue, because refugee is a political term, and refugees, the fact that we have to determine that these people are refugees, that they have nowhere to go and they have, their country has forsaken them, is a very lengthy process. So for that, you have UNHCR, you have got other global agencies which verify that. But unfortunately for Pakistan, in the last 1 decade, or actually last 2 decades, we've only had 3,000 people who were registered as refugees in Pakistan, and the rest of them were termed as economic immigrants. This basically meant that the support which Pakistan received for these incoming people coming into Pakistan was just nearly around $30 a person, which is of course not enough for them to sustain. So for us at this moment, we have 3 major concerns. One is terrorism. Whether or not that is going to be, whether we are going to be facing such kind of elements which would be coming through. Second is the people who would be coming to Pakistan, what would be their financial situation, whether they can sustain on their own, and if their imminent need is food and security, then we would register them as temporary displaced personnel, and hopefully we expect that they will go back. Last is this, that we can come up with some semi-permanent areas, and then eventually they can be transferred back to Afghanistan once the situation stabilizes. Because there is a lot of hope that this time the Taliban takeover of the Afghan government would not be accompanied with lots of bloodshed, or would not be accompanied with lots of civil war with no end in sight.
Absolutely. I was just about to come to this point now. Maria, please stay with us now. Taking this point to Arshad Yusufzai. Now, the Taliban claim that there is not going to be any more civilian casualties in Afghanistan. And the Taliban look in a quite peaceful mood right now. And obviously, as they've also asked that they will not take over Kabul, but they will go and have peace negotiations with the Kabul for taking over power peacefully. Keeping this in view, now, Arshad Yusufzai, please tell us, the Taliban are not going to harm the civilians, and obviously, why would they? But keeping this in mind, when they are not going to be taking any action against the civilians are going to be taken care of. So that does not make a situation in which a situation might arise that the people might start to walk towards Pakistan.
Well, one thing is for sure, the Taliban, as they have committed that they're not going to cause any damage to the civilians, that they're not going to hurt anyone, be it civilians or even people who had worked with the government or even in the military. So they are going to stick to their plans. However, some people, including people who had lived ultra-modern life, I would say, in Afghanistan, who are educated, who know the modern world, they would be still under fear, and they would want to leave out Afghanistan. They would want to go to any safer place because they would still fear. The Taliban, however, they have said it, and they mean it, that the people should stay in Afghanistan because they are serious about running the government afterwards. So they believe that these people are important for running a smooth government in Kabul.
Right, Arshad, also, as you said, this is a political question, and I'm sure you will have to answer this question, and then I'll take this question to Maria now. There is, Arshad, you were talking about fear. So who is the fear instigated from? Is it the Kabul government, or is it the Taliban?
Well, it's mostly the media propaganda and then the Kabul government, that they have been, portraying the Taliban as monsters. Whatever was in the past, that has gone. The Taliban have changed a lot in the past 20 years. My experience with meetings with them, and the understanding that these people now understand girls' education is important. They know that it is important for the country to move forward, having international relations with nations that were not recognizing Afghanistan's Taliban's rule in the past. All these things, including health facilities for everybody, the Taliban understand that this has to change now. Unfortunately, the Kabul government, they portrayed the Taliban as bad as they were in the past. Even the good things that they did, they were not highlighted. Propaganda machine was active, so much so that everywhere, dramas were created against the Taliban. Fake reports shown as credible reports were propagated through media, through Twitter and other platforms, media platforms. But in reality, the Taliban have been able to negate those claims or those propagandas, those fake news very cleverly through the use of social media. Otherwise, many people in the country know and they have seen the Taliban, the way they have behaved or treated their enemies, their worst enemies like Ismail Khan, like governor in Kandahar, Ghor or Jalalabad. They have seen how well they were treated. They believe that the Taliban have changed now and that they are far better than the Afghan government.
Right. Maria, I'd like to bring this point to you now. Obviously, as I asked Arshad, that who is instigating fear into the civilians? Is it the Kabul government or is it Taliban? Or as Arshad Yusufzai, it is Kabul's propaganda?
I think we have to be realistic about it. It is usually the fact whenever there is a transition which is done through military means and where the outgoing government is not willing to go, without putting in a fight, there is uncertainty. There is uncertainty because Afghanistan has gone through a civil war earlier. There is uncertainty because people are not sure how this transition will go. So a lot will depend in terms of how this transition goes, and whether we will be facing a lot of refugees or not will be dependent in terms of next 1 week. Then we will not see a lot of influx. We will see, the loyalists of the current Afghan government leaving Afghanistan, but you would see by and large stability. Then second question is also in terms of how the border areas will be managed. Because if the border areas, you're able to restore the government and you're able to restore the basic functions, then this, catastrophe may be averted. And I think it's not just a question for Pakistan to figure what the refugees will be doing. We have seen that if there is a conflict, whether it's in Syria, it is in Afghanistan, the influx will land back into Europe. So there's a lot of stakes with regards to those people who spent years in trying to build Afghanistan in whatever way they think they have done so. So the continuation of the Afghan government will be critical. Afghan National Army to function, the Afghan government, which has got at this moment in their treasury $9.2 billion, but these dollars are actually used for Afghanistan's stability rather than for instability. So these are some questions which are there, and a lot will depend in terms of how the transition happens tomorrow.
Right. Maria, also tell us, Mullah Baradar is, according to the latest report, he is on his way to Kabul. So, and I'm sure, obviously, he's not going to be sitting with the Ghani administration, obviously. So how do you see this transition happening? Obviously, the Taliban has said that they will be looking for a peaceful transition. But what if things go wrong?
Well, there are only two options here. One is that Ashraf Ghani resigns, which is imminent, because if he resigns, then we will see Hibatullah as well as the other Mullah Baradar as well there. But if he doesn't resign and he decides that he's going to fight back, then there's a big question mark who in the Afghan National Army will do so, because there is no help coming and there is no two opinions on this matter, that Afghanistan is not going to witness the third American-Afghan war here. Joe Biden is in no position to declare a new war, while the fight is not for international terrorism, the fight is for international recognition. No, the fight is actually for a transition of the government in Kabul. So if they want to domestically interfere at that level, then the entire presumptions on which the Doha talks, on the entire presumption on which the American army left Afghanistan will become questioned. So I think we are looking at a peaceful transition, but if Ashraf Ghani tries to fight back, there could be fighting, maybe for a month, maybe for 2 weeks, but at the end, there will be surrender. But that could be bloody, and maybe it would lead to Ashraf Ghani losing his life.
Right, Arshad, just to continue on this statement just said by Maria now, do you think there is going to be a peaceful negotiations between the Taliban and the Kabul government, or do you think if the things go wrong, if Kabul denies peaceful negotiations and they keep their old rhetoric in place, what do you think, how are the things going to move ahead?
Well, I have firm belief that it's going to be a very peaceful transition because even if Dr. Ashraf Ghani do not want to resign at this time or at a later stage, people are abandoning him. And there is a fact behind this that the Taliban are not going to, they are not just taking over Kabul right now. They have been in talks, in secret talks with many important figures for the past many months, including people like Hanif Atmar and the Vice President, Amrullah Saleh. It is believed that many people now want Ashraf Ghani to go, and in case Ashraf Ghani decides not to resign, these people are going to abandon him. The army is not going to support his cause anymore, and they are just simply going to leave it to the Taliban. Now, if we talk about how the Taliban are going to manage this, it is important to remind that they have at least 25 commissions. Military commission is one of them, the education commission, health, and so many commissions there. One of the commission is called the Dawat and Jalb commission that had a responsibility of contacting people who are against the Taliban, who are not who are in the government, and these people have been working hard for the past many months to convince anti-Taliban people to join them, and we have seen that in many places that tactic has worked. I believe that when the Taliban take over Kabul, it will be a peaceful one, and then they have people to run the required. They have required capacity of people to manage all the authorities or government departments.
Right. We've just got latest news that President Ghani is still in Afghanistan. Obviously, there were rumors that he has fled the country. Now, there was rumors that he fled the country. Can that be a possibility, Arshad?
Well, he would not want to stay behind in the end. He would try to get on board any plane that is available to go out of Afghanistan. That's what I think.
Right. Maria, what do you think? It's obviously a rumor till date, but...
No, I think it's not going to be so simple. He can, take flight and leave. He will have to resign, and he will have to hand over the power. Because the question is, where do you land? It's not that you've taken a flight and you just landed on another side of the world and everybody would accept you. And then if you're going to be that kind of a leader and that's what you're expecting your future is, then nobody wants to have an absconder national president in their borders. That's not so simple, one. And number two, Ashraf Ghani would have to face his demons. He would have to resign. He would have to transfer power and then eventually leave. Maybe after that, yes, he would be on the first flight out of Kabul, but not prior to that, because prior to that means that everything would be left in limbo. It's like it would be chaos. It would be what happens to the Afghan treasury, what happens to the national army, what happens to the Afghan parliament, what happens to the interim setup. So it's not going to be so simple. And a lot of powers have invested a lot of money, effort, and time in all these structures. So I don't think it's going to be so simple. The only thing which Ashraf Ghani has at this moment is whether he can prolong, the surrender of Kabul and surrender of his government. And in that case, it's also a very tall order because he's expecting a lot of bloodshed. And for what? For Afghanistan? No. For his own government? Yes. How many people in Afghanistan actually want to fight for his government? That's a big question mark, and certainly not the Afghan National Army.
Right, Maria, also we've just had diplomatic sources say that Ali Ahmed Jilali, a US-based academic and former Afghan interior minister, has been tapped to head an interim Afghan administration. So would the Taliban accept him as the new Afghan leader? Interim, of course. I
don't think so. The interim government would be Taliban-led, because it is their foot soldiers on ground and they're warlords in different provinces. So to expect this thing that it would be anybody which the Americans would send in or anybody which Ashraf Ghani would put in place, which is going to lead the interim setup, would be inaccurate assessment. Because the warring faction, the faction which is on top, the faction which has got Taliban in lead, and the faction which is at this moment holding Kabul at siege, is the one which is going to put up that setup, are going to lead that setup and will lead this transitional government. Any other ideas about that would be wrong and inaccurate.